Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
Through investigation, major crime investigators were able to identify Mr. James Harris as the person responsible for that incident in the 2100 block of Chrysler Center Drive.
Joyful that I don't have to do this anymore. And it's a big reflection for sure, a big journey that I accomplished. Some nights were really scary out here.
We need more care and attention to what is taking place. I certainly hope that we can solve the issue of code blacks in the area. I think we can get there, but when we're not willing to properly recognize and address the problems, then I don't see that happening.
Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a hardening position from the City of Windsor on vaccinations. Today, it updated its policy saying any unvaccinated employee will be fired. Staff had up until last Monday to show proof of vaccination or a medical exception or be suspended without pay. The city says it conducted a significant amount of training and education to address concerns around vaccine efficacy and safety. Even so, about 200 employees, approximately 7%, remained unvaccinated or undeclared. Non-compliance on the part of Transit Windsor staff has already impacted that city service. It will be reducing routes starting Sunday because of a shortage of vaccinated drivers. So in order to meet the needs of residents, the city says positions need to be filled and therefore unvaccinated staff terminated. Firings won't take place immediately. Staff have until February 1st to show they're double vaxxed or provide a medical exemption. The man accused in the first-degree murder case of a Windsor mom testified today, and he admitted to killing her, which he claimed was accidental. Much of the testimony today involved a strip club and cocaine the accused admitted to using prior to the victim's death. The CBC's Jason Vio joins us live now with more. Jason, what exactly did the accused say?
Well, 31-year-old Jitesh Bogle spent all day testifying about what he remembered leading up to Autumn Taggart's death. It was around 2:15 a.m. on June 10th of 2018 that Bogle came from Michigan to Windsor. He said he felt like going to a strip club, so he drove to Cheetah's, but he decided when he got there not to go in. As he pulled into an alley to possibly turn around, Bogle said a man approached him asking for change, then asking if he wanted anything. Bogle testified he asked for cocaine, although he claims to have never used it before. Over the course of that night, he admits to doing about 8 lines of cocaine on 3 different occasions, possibly more, he says. After paying for a large quantity of the drug, he drove the 2 people who sold it to him back to an area on University Avenue West. That just happened to be right next to where the victim, Autumn Taggart, lived. Bogle testified while he was doing some lines of cocaine in his car, the 2 drug dealers ran out of the car. He said they took the rest of the drugs and the money, essentially ripping him off. Bogle says that's when he went out looking for them. Then all of a sudden, his testimony, based on his memory, jumps to being inside the victim's apartment. Bogle became very emotional at this point. His face was twitching, trying to hold back tears and wiping tears with a tissue. He remembers a woman on the floor with a purse, he says. His defense lawyer asked how he got in. He says he likely climbed up the exterior of the building through the balcony. Here's some of what he said next in court. Quote, subsequently, I remember looking at a face and this face staring back at me. I've never seen somebody look at me in such horror or fear. The next thing I know, there's a scream or a person is screaming. I remember there being a struggle. I remember asking for quiet. I remember saying, I'm sorry, I'm not here to hurt you. And then the screaming stops. I didn't know why until I sort of saw the injuries I had caused. After the screaming had stopped, I came to the instant conclusion that I had accidentally killed her. Now, Bogle says he then began performing CPR and eventually moved her body onto the bed.
So, Jason, in court today, where did he say he went next?
So Bogle testified that he doesn't know what happened right after that or how he left the apartment for that matter. His memory jumps again to being at his uncle's house who lives in Windsor. He crossed back over into Michigan that same morning and called his parents once he got to his apartment in Michigan. He told them what he could remember. Bogle said he drove to Seattle that night where his parents lived. He said in court today he didn't have the courage to come forward, so he waited for authorities to come to him. Bogle was arrested in August, 2 months after Taggart died.
The Crown Attorney had the opportunity to cross-examine the accused today. So what happened there?
Well, Katerina, they spent a lot of time pressing him on his intentions to go to that strip club. The Crown Attorney suggested it was a sexual impulse and that he wanted a prostitute, as a previous witness had testified. He disagreed. They suggested he had no intention of ever going to the strip club and that he just wanted cocaine. Again, Bogle disagreed. Here's a brief exchange between the Crown Attorney and the accused. The Crown Attorney said, "You're lying to the jury, sir, about your familiarity with cocaine. You are an experienced cocaine user." Bogle said, "I disagree." Then the Crown Attorney responded with, "Only an experienced user would ask to test the quality of the cocaine." Bogle also admits he doesn't remember a lot of what happened in Taggart's room, but the Crown said Bogle's conduct that night was, quote, completely incompatible with someone who had never done cocaine before. Bogle's testimony is expected to continue tomorrow.
Thanks for this, Jason. The CBC's Jason Veal live tonight. Windsor police continue to investigate a suspect they arrested yesterday in connection with the explosive device set off at the Windsor Assembly Plant on November 4th. 33-year-old James Harris was arrested leaving his apartment on Drouillard Road.
In the morning, our members of the Emergency Services Unit, or ESU, were able to locate and observe Mr. Harris leaving a residence in the 1700 block of Drouillard Road in a vehicle, and they subsequently conducted a vehicle stop, I believe, in the 3600 block of Seminole.
Police say Harris was arrested without incident. They say he had access to a second floor, a little used area of the Windsor Assembly Plant, and that's where the explosive device blew up. No one was injured. Harris is charged with explosion, disregard for human life, intent to cause explosion likely to cause serious bodily harm or death, and cause serious damage to property. He is expected to appear in court by video on November 22nd for a bail hearing. Windsor police are seeking more information from the public. 10 years after the Windsor Youth Center opened its doors in the city, it's still the only drop-in space for at-risk and homeless youth. One man tells CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa about what living on the streets was like for him.
Right about here. Yeah.
Michael Nichols points out where he used to spend nights in Malden Park. At 16 years old, Nichols says he went down a dark path.
Started stealing liquor and getting really bad with it. And then I started hanging out with the wrong crowds of people and getting into getting into some bad drugs.
He says it was luck that made him stumble into the Windsor Youth Center, which had only just opened its doors. The drop-in center for youth offers food and a place to hang out. A decade later, it also provides parenting and rehab programming. Nichols' story is all too familiar to Youth Center Program Manager Donna Roy. She spent the last 7 years helping youth who find themselves without shelter. On any night, up to 30 Windsor youth are likely couch surfing or sleeping on the streets. Roy says there's still more work to be done.
If I had a magic wand and I could wave it and say this is what we want, it would be to have that, the youth emergency shelter, to have those beds available as soon as possible.
The downtown mission has the only 4 designated youth shelter beds in the city. A 2020 review of Windsor's emergency shelters found the city needs quadruple that, while another report says youth are overrepresented in the city's homeless population.
You know, we recognize that that is a gap, definitely for a community our size. We just haven't had the ability through funding to be able to address it. The purchase and construction of a shelter is expensive. And really, it doesn't yield really good outcomes for youth to be in a shelter.
But as the weather gets colder, Roy is already thinking of the youth she'll find sleeping in the snow. Nichols also agrees that there's more to be done. He spent the last 8 years volunteering at the center. And while he's pulled through, there's been others who haven't.
It was a dark path, like very dark. Like one days you don't feel like you're good enough or you're like a failure, and you had nowhere to go, no one you can trust. You had no good friends, no support. So it was like each day you're getting worse and worse and worse. The more you drink, the more you feel better. So I had to flip that around and think of the positive instead of the negative.
In Malden, Nichols reflects on how far he's come and says he now can't wait to create new memories in that same park with his 3 children. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
A shortage of ambulances led to another code black in Windsor, Essex this week. That's declared when there are no ambulances available to respond to 911 calls. It's become a growing concern in our region, even leading to a death in the community. The president of the local paramedics union says more needs to be done to address chronic shortages of staff and resources, and that county council isn't taking the issue seriously enough.
And specifically in relation to a member of the community who passed away while waiting 5 hours for an ambulance. And county council referred to the public concern that was being raised as noise. And so when you see that being the response, it certainly can be frustrating. This is a public safety concern. Yet every time county council addresses the issue, they deflect by saying that this is a province issue, or this is a hospital issue, or that the union is doing this for bargaining. Well, that's simply not true.
Essex County Warden Gary McNamara did not respond to our request for comment. The union adds a small number of paramedics were laid off this week for not complying with the vaccine policy for city employees. However, he says at least 50 more paramedics would need to be hired for Essex Windsor EMS to run at full capacity. The EMS chief says its offload delays are directly to blame for the code blacks. He says they're becoming longer and more frequent now than ever. That's when a patient arrives to the hospital in an ambulance, but there is nobody there to receive the patient right away. Paramedics are then tasked with patient care until a spot opens up at the hospital. Code blacks also put pressure on EMTs from nearby municipalities like Chatham-Kent to step up and bridge the gap, causing a ripple effect of delays. The COVID-19 situation in our region is continuing to take a downward turn. In the last week, the local case rate has nearly doubled. Cases and outbreaks are on the upswing. Today, 66 new cases were added to the caseload, and that's the highest daily uptick since early September. There are currently 326 active cases and 27 outbreaks. 5 of those are at schools. And with that, schools should soon be much safer for kids. That's because Health Canada will approve a COVID-19 vaccine for children as young as 5 years old tomorrow. It will be for a vaccine from Pfizer-BioNTech. And CBC News has learned the pediatric vaccines could arrive within days. David Cochran has more.
In the U.S., kids between the ages of 5 and 11 have been lining up and rolling up their sleeves for weeks. More than 2.5 million have had their first shot of Pfizer so far, something that will soon happen in Canada.
Just knowing that it's here now is really exciting.
Well, what if we have sun on one side?
Misty Pratt spoke to CBC News last summer about the impact the pandemic was having on her family. Since then, her 12-year-old daughter, Aylin, is fully vaccinated. Her 9-year-old, Emily, will be as soon as she can.
It's just been that anxious sort of waiting of, is something going to happen? Is a case going to come up? And now knowing that we can protect her makes us feel a lot better.
Children under 12 continues to have the highest incidence rates across all age groups.
Friday's formal approval will come 1 week after this warning from Dr. Theresa Tam. With more than 85% of Canadians over 12 fully vaccinated, younger children are the last unprotected group.
And I can promise you, we are ready. As soon as we receive the 5 to 11-year-old supply from the federal government, our public health units and local partners are ready to receive and administer the Pfizer vaccine.
Federal officials are working with Pfizer to lock down a firm delivery schedule. The Prime Minister has said that 2.9 million doses will be shipped to Canada shortly after approval, and sources say that will likely happen next week. Then it's up to provinces to get those doses in arms. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is now meeting with his counterparts from the U.S. and Mexico in Washington. Trudeau headed into the discussions with several concerns. Top among them is one of U.S. President Joe Biden's signature policies, a plan involving electric vehicles. Ashley Burke has more.
side by side but still far apart on some key issues.
Well, it's great to welcome back the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Joe. It's been a busy year.
U.S. President Joe Biden meeting in the Oval Office today with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. A dispute over the auto sector threatening to become a major sticking point.
But there's a lot of complicating factors.
Trudeau trying to persuade Biden to change course on his plan to give tax incentives to those who buy electric vehicles made in the U.S. Canada's auto industry says it could throw the sector into turmoil and is worse than anything Donald Trump ever proposed.
Do you think you can find common ground on the e-tax? The answer is I don't know, and I don't know what we're going to be dealing with, quite frankly, when it comes out in legislation, so we'll talk about it then.
Biden making no promises. Canada's looking to Mexico for support on this issue.
Lots of great things to talk about, lots of things we agree and align on.
Muy buena relación.
We are countries that collaborate and cooperate.
A source says Canadian ministers also met with members of the Biden administration last night at the home of Canada's ambassador, where they pressed the same message Trudeau gave congressional leaders earlier in the day, calling the tax credit a clear violation of the new NAFTA agreement.
He sort of said, guys, we all spent a lot of time negotiating this agreement, so do you really want to violate it in such a significant way so soon after its passage?
We don't view it that way. I think it's safe to say. I would say that in our view, Amr, the electric vehicle tax credits is an opportunity to help consumers in this country.
But Canada says if this American measure goes ahead as is, it could become the dominant issue in the Canada-U.S. relationship. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Washington.
Let's take a live look outside there. It's chilly and we've got a chance of flurries this evening. It's also windy. It's so windy that the Pelee Island ferry has canceled some trips because of those winds. Tonight's ferry from Kingsville and the one that was due to leave tomorrow morning at 8, they've been canceled, but regular schedules should resume tomorrow at 10 a.m. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy will be here after the break and she will have your weather forecast. BC announced today that people affected by the flooding and landslides can start making claims for relief through the Provincial Disaster Financial Assistance Fund. The mayor of Abbotsford says the bill for damage to the city and its surrounding farmlands could reach $1 billion. Meanwhile, people stranded by the high water continue to be moved out of the devastated Fraser Valley. CBC's Lindsay Duncombe is in Vancouver with the latest developments.
4 days in, the scope of the damage is hitting hard.
Sorry, it's been tough.
Gord Calvert escaped his home in a kayak. There's so much loss, but the emotion that overwhelms is gratitude.
There were 300 people who sandbagged at the Barrow pump station. They literally saved the prairie. So thank you to all those people.
There are signs of relief and resilience. This train brought passengers stranded 4 nights in Hope to Vancouver. Highway 7 opened 1 lane only, a slow-moving and careful escape. And safe in a hotel room, 2-month-old Jackson, whose first night out of the NICU was a chaotic scramble of roadblocks, U-turns, and parental panic.
Between a newborn and a first-time mom and 3 adults in a hotel room not being at home, it's been a lot, to say the least.
Military planes have made it into the province. The arriving troops know the job they have ahead of them is a big one.
They can evacuate people to safety, offer help to those who are vulnerable, stranded, or in distress, support critical provincial supply chains.
Officials promise these scenes are temporary, that food will come from other parts of Canada. But the floods have shocked the heart of BC's agriculture industry. There's a race to get feed and water to chickens and cows.
I know of a barn that probably has 800 cows in it screaming for water. They're not going to survive. They need to let trailers in to get them out, or they need to fix the water.
Getting anything anywhere is going to be a challenge for a long time. Fixing this will take weeks, months, and cost a lot of money. The mayor of Abbotsford said the province and the feds have promised to help.
I take them all at their word, but I've also prepared them for one big bill at the end of this, because this is not going to be just, 10 million or 50 million. This is in the multiple hundreds, if not maybe higher than that going forward.
Some of that repair work is urgent, as there is significant rain in the forecast for early next week. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's bring in Colette Kennedy now for a look at our local weather. Colette, I did a thing which I do a lot, which is I underdress, and I wore a jean jacket today, which was a bad idea. It wasn't enough. It was cold.
Yeah, it's one or the other, right? Under, over, that's why the layering is such an art, and it's so helpful. But, I'm sure you're like many others, because just before midnight last night, it was 10 degrees, double digits, right, into the late evening hours, and then as forecast, that temperature has been coming down through the day. So I just want to show you, you can see very clearly here illustrated where that cold front is, and the warmer temperatures. It's almost 20 degrees in New York. That'd be a nice place to be today. Boston at 14. And then look at our readings as this colder air, and look at northwestern Ontario as this colder air has pushed in. So a closer look at what we're seeing here as those temperatures has continued to fall here through the day. And we're also looking at some of those squalls that have set up. The wind's strong enough that enough of a fetch, bringing them right across to us from Lake Michigan. So looking at wet flurries in the forecast and through the overnight hours, and then eventually we will get into some clearing as we see a bit of a shift in the winds. Eventually they'll come down, but there'll be more of a shift in terms of that letting things subside a bit. But it's not going to subside in these areas here. I hope you aren't traveling there in the lee of Lake Huron around Georgian Bay. Not just snow squall warnings, but winter weather travel advisories for very nasty conditions, whiteout conditions, and very slick roadways. So we look ahead and we do get into that clearing, and the winds will die off by tomorrow afternoon especially, so we'll get into more sunshine, and it's going to be a nice day Friday in that regard. And then Saturday, the next system comes in with cloud cover and a slight chance midday for some rain showers pushing through, kind of a mixed precip in there. There are those strong winds. There's tomorrow afternoon. They will have died down. quick look at what's happening with your temperatures tonight. They're going to keep falling, but they're not dropping off too much farther. And then look at a very nice day, really a nice Friday, the weather in terms of what awaits us and what awaits us for the second half of the weekend. Katarina, some wet weather coming our way.
Indeed. Thanks so much for this, Colette.
You're welcome.
And right after the break, Bright Lights Windsor is back. Stay with us. In 2 weeks, Windsor's annual Bright Lights Festival is back on. After a citywide format last year because of pandemic restrictions, the event will return to its traditional central location at Jackson's Park.
I think the whole community is just looking forward to getting back to Bright Lights after being canceled for a year.
The mayor says the festival has grown to include 2 million lights, and Windsorites should prepare to be dazzled. This year's theme, Walking in a Windsor Wonderland. Event pathways will guide visitors through a series of festive displays. Additions include some new selfie stations. And from one Windsor to another and one light show to another, this one of the British royal variety. A section of Windsor Castle's Great Park has been turned into a dazzling display of sound and light.
It's very good.
I thought it was very, very good.
Yeah.
I love the, there was a screen with
holograms.
Oh, right, okay.
Holograms.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent.
Windsor Great Park Illuminated is now open to the public. The colorful light and sound installations will be on display until January 9th. The light trail is 2 kilometers long and takes about 90 minutes to walk through. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.